So today we have an amazing, amazing interview with a woman that I've been following for over 10 years. Business growth expert, Dr. Monikah Ogando. Her company, CEO Mastery Inc., is ranked by Inc. 500 as one of the nation's fastest growing private companies, and their firm is devoted to empowering entrepreneurs around the world to grow their business by leveraging 4 pillars of business growth. 1, leadership. 2, talent optimization. 3, systems. And 4, profit. Maybe you've read one of her articles featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, Businessweek, Harvard Business Review, Inc. Magazine, or Fast Company. She's also the author of On Fire, 7 Strategies to Ignite Your Business and Light Up Your Life, and Sacred Commerce, 7 Spheres of Spirit-Driven Leadership, which is heavily influenced by her doctoral work in comparative religions and organizational psychology. Oh my gosh, it's a mouthful, and I just basically wanted to boil that down into like one word, and it's chingona. Total badass. On this interview, this is all about 30 women empowering, however many we are allowed to touch, 30 inspiring women. And you are really at the top of my list because, well, just tell me a little bit about how you grew up. What was the culture of your home like? We know what your accomplishments are, but how did you get there?
My home life, you mean like with my parents and how I grew up?
Yes.
Yeah. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic and born and raised with parents who both valued education very much and worked for the government and then saw the tides changing when there was an election coming up and they saw that the administration was going to change and for them their power or standing or whatever you want to call it would change as well. So they decided to come to the United States to give their children a better education that was not contingent on, who was seated at the top of the political, totem pole. And by the time that I was 11, I was already in 9th grade just because I just, was precocious academically. And when I got to this country, they treated me like, I don't know, an alien. Like, what is an 11-year-old doing in 9th grade? Like, what do you eat? Where'd you come from? And one of the things that my parents taught me was if you've earned it, then you don't have to defend it. It's yours. And so they did a whole bunch of like IQ tests and comprehensive tests and this and that. And at the time, I knew very little English because we had just gotten to this country. So I had to kind of quote unquote prove myself even through some language deficiencies that I had just because, I wasn't exposed to the language as much as a native speaker would be. And so what that taught me, unbeknownst to me, I mean, I went through it and, the lessons only come in hindsight. But what that taught me was, number one, that people in authority don't always know what's best because there were a lot of people in authority that were just wrong about what I could do, how I got there, and my intelligence and my capabilities and so forth. So that's number one. Number two, that you always, always, always will do better when there's somebody in your corner. If I did this with parents who weren't committed to my academic excellence, if I did this with parents who weren't trying to be involved, there's a lot of parents who want the best for their children, but they're stuck in a survival game. Like I have 3 jobs. I don't have time to go to a PTA meeting or whatever, And so if I had not had that support, it would have been easy for me to give up. So you're always going to do better when you have people in your corner to support you, even if they don't know what they're doing, even if they don't have access to a network that you may need, which I'll get to in a little bit. My parents were just immigrants who worked in factory jobs, but they were just so committed to seeing, whatever was best for me that gave me enough oomph and courage to keep going. And then number 3 is you've gotta get you some power.
Yes, girl.
So for me, as an 11-year-old at the time, and then later on as a high schooler, and I went to boarding school, Phillips Academy, Andover, what that meant was getting very knowledgeable about laws, immigration laws, employment laws, education laws, and all this other stuff, because I just felt so questioned and just tried, child. Like, people just tried me since I got here.
Talk about it, Monikah. Oh, my gosh.
So I just felt like, man, this is just a disrespectful country. They just don't want to see us win, right? And I had to learn a lot about laws and what's allowable and what's legal and what's all of that, so that I can fight for myself and advocate for myself. In fact, the word for lawyer in Spanish is abogado, and it comes from the Latin word to advocate. So I kind of had to advocate for myself in that way. And so that kind of gave me a fire in my belly for fighting for the underdog. There are people out there who are so talented, so genius, so much to give and to contribute and can innovate and can literally change the world if only they had that access or that platform or that knowledge or that know-how or, understood laws or understood systems or understood, all of those things that I kind of had to figure out for myself. And when I got to college, I got to college by sheer will, which it wasn't strange for me at that point. And I paid for it myself through, loans and working for myself and getting a part-time job here and there whenever I could. By the time I got out of college, I went to work as an executive assistant at a financial services firm. You may have heard of it, Charles Schwab. And that was the first time that I had seen a Latina woman in a very prestigious and power-centered role. There was a senior executive vice president of the region, and she was a Puerto Rican woman. And I took to her immediately. Now, one of the things that is important to know about our culture is that you may have your nationality. When you're in the Dominican Republic, everybody's Dominican. When you're in Puerto Rico, everybody's Puerto Rican. When you're in Mexico, everybody's Mexican. But when you come to this country, it doesn't matter whether you're Mexican or Puerto Rican or Dominican. We're all brothers or cousins or whatever,
Talk about it, Monikah, please.
So when I came to this country, I didn't see her like, oh, she's Puerto Rican. She doesn't know my story. It's like, no, she's Puerto Rican. Of all the people, she would be the one to know your story, So I asked her, who are the people who make the most money in this firm? And she said, well, in all firms, the people who make the most money are the people who sell. I said, okay, so who sells here? She said, the stockbrokers, the account managers. I was like, how do I become an account manager? She said, well, you gotta take some exams, and you've got to pass your Series 7 so that you can sell stocks and bonds. You can pass 63 and 24 and all these other exams she mentioned. I said, all right, how do I do that? She goes, you got to get sponsored. I said, will you sponsor me? And she's like looking at me like, where did this girl get all this, like, como tú dices, chingona, And I think by just my sheer unabashed asking, she was impressed by that. And she said, okay, if you could do it. What she didn't know was that I had just graduated college, and I was so used to taking like 16, 18, 19 credits per semester. When she was talking about you have to study really hard, I was like, girl, you don't know me. If I could do 19 credits and 2 jobs, I can certainly do a little Series 67, 63 exam or whatever. So I was used to the hustle. I was used to, having to prove myself, having to work hard, having to do all of that. And I got all my exams. I got all my licenses. I started selling financial products. I outpaced almost everybody in my office. And then the market changed. Then there was a market correction and a dip in production. And as you may know, sometimes just because the market dips doesn't mean that your sales quota does. And so I had to figure out a way to continue to keep up my production without using what used to work before. And for many people who are in online businesses, they've been in that dip for a while. And so I figured out, I've always been kind of like a scientist of like what works, what doesn't work, and documenting my steps. And that documenting my steps became a curriculum to teach other salespeople and associates and account managers how to attract and engage and retain high net worth clients. And I ended up spending a year going all over the country teaching that as a curriculum, internal curriculum for our employees. And then came performance review time. And I have to back up. A week prior to that performance review, I had been diagnosed with stage 4 cervical cancer. I was in my mid-20s. I was already married and had a child. You know, college was behind me. I was a full-time employee and just, you know, on the top of my game in my 20s. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing the damn thing. This is what I went to college for, right? So the stage 4 cervical cancer diagnosis was a doozy. It just floored me. I was in a state of shock for like a week, not knowing what to do or who to tell, how am I going to tell my parents, you know, all of that. So by the time that I got to the performance review meeting, I was still in that kind of like a daze. And I remember, if you remember the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, where there was like this big bullpen where everybody was just talking and just all over each other and on the phone. And so I had to walk through a bullpen like that to go to the conference room where they were holding the performance review meetings. And a friend of mine, a colleague, pulled me out of the sidewalk hallway into a side hallway, and she says, I don't know if you know this, but I overheard one of them in the bathroom, and they're going to fire you. That's not a performance review. That's a firing squad. And I was like, what? How? Why? I was just, again, that shell shock state of mind. But something in me clicked. Like, I got pissed, Angel. I was like, I'm working this hard. I've been hustling for so long. I've been trying to keep it together, and now my life is at stake, and you're playing with my money? Oh, hell no. Oh, man. I went in there kind of like with George Jefferson. I don't know if you ever saw that show with George Jefferson.
Many times.
Yeah.
Moving on up.
Yeah. So I walked in there with my little George Jefferson walk, like, I dare you to say something. And so, yeah, they wanted to give me, in their words, a very generous severance pay, but they didn't hire me to be a trainer. They hired me to be a stockbroker, and I wasn't doing my job. And I was like, are you kidding me? Not only am I doing my job, I've kept up my quota, but I've been teaching these other F-meffers how to do theirs, you know. I was pissed. And then they're like, well, you know, we thank you for your service, and we'll keep your intellectual property. And I had a little Scooby-Doo moment. I was like, what do you mean you're going to keep my intellectual property? And I didn't sign an intellectual property agreement when I first got employed. And they're like, oh, yeah, you did. Everybody has. So I was like, check my personnel file. Sure enough, there was no IP agreement. I was like, if you found an IP agreement in there, it's because you forged it. Because I know I didn't sign it. I remember, you know, when you first get into an employment situation, you have to sign 1,000 different things. The W-2s and the this and the that and the benefits and the blah, 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 and the non-disclosure agreement. And I remember distinctly looking at the IP agreement that says that anything that you create under our employment becomes our property. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to have for breakfast. Look at mine, what I will be creating, you know. So I didn't sign it, but I also didn't say anything. I didn't mention it. I didn't make a big deal. So nobody noticed until, of course, it became relevant at that time. And so what happened was that then that turned the negotiation tables in my favor. If you really want this, you're going to have to pay it. And thank God, once again, remember what I said about, you know, the lesson about having access and knowing the law and all of that. I had a friend who went to the University of Miami Law School when I was in University of Miami undergrad. And he told me about copyright derivatives. In the common parlance, that's just paying for samples. Like James Brown is one of the most sampled artists in music. And every time that you hear a James Brown sample, the James Brown estate gets paid. And copyright derivative just means that if you create a new work based on original work, then you have to pay the people who made the original work. And so when I was negotiating my contract with them, it was a consulting contract so that I can continue to train their people and measure their performance in terms of sales, and then continue to develop curriculum for them. And then based on my friend at law school, I argued for having a copyright derivative clause inside of my contract so that anything new that they created based on my original work, they would have to pay me for. So it's kind of like a royalty plus licensing agreement. And I walked out with a 6-figure contract out of that. And I remember the amount to this date, $124,856. And it would have been $125, except that I had a pending expense report that then they deducted from the contract. So I was like, okay, you can't win them all. So that started my business. And I started my business because I was, you know, they asked me who I wanted to make the check out to. I was like, I don't want $125,000 in my name. That's a lot of tax liability. Put it in Ogando Associates. So then I had to rush home and incorporate an Ogando Associates entity and get an EIN and get a bank account, and then I deposited the check and prayed that it cashed, and I got used to checks cashing really quickly, so I became spoiled at the very beginning. And then 2001 happened, and all the work that I had done as a consultant slowed down, and so I depended a lot on the licensing fees that then carried me through when I didn't have clients, right? And that became a 10-plus year consulting relationship. And what I teach entrepreneurs today is that you have to leverage not only who you know and what you know, but how you deliver it. And so I work a lot with entrepreneurs to teach them how to develop their intellectual property and their brand, to systemize it so that they can optimize their profits as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible. And so that they can be free. You know, when you're stuck in survival mode, you can't see opportunities. Opportunities are only available when you have, a roof over your head and you've paid your bills and so forth. You have enough bandwidth to be able to look at opportunities. Otherwise, you're just stuck in survival. And so when you can handle the money situation, handle the status quo situation, and get your bare minimums handled, whether that means with an angel investor, venture capital, a licensing contract, the bread and butter clients and consultants that will pay your bills. Then you have some room to be strategic about the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years in your business. And some people don't have that long of a horizon. They don't think 20 years out. Sometimes we're just thinking quarter per quarter. But what that allows you to do is to be wise and discerning about what you say yes to, what you say no to, and to make peace with it. I've never been the kind of person who needs a platform. I don't need to be the star. I've always been the person kind of like in the background making moves. And so I have not built a superstar brand. It hasn't been like the Monikah show. And that's just fine with me. There are some people for whom that is very important. And I'm not saying it's good or bad or right or wrong, but when you know yourself, then you know how to direct your business. You know how to craft your brand so that it speaks to how you naturally function and the values and the core priorities that you have in the world. Because your business is supposed to be an extension of you. It's your child. It's your creation. So in some ways it looks like you and it works like you. And to the degree that your work is dysfunctional, then it's just showing you the things that you have to work on personally, because every business challenge is a personal growth challenge in disguise. And it's your best teacher. Just like our children are our teachers, our business is our teacher also, because it's telling you where you don't communicate well, how you don't follow up, where you miss opportunities, where you're thinking small, how your limited thinking is affecting you. And if you're willing to confront the lessons that your business brings you, you can make a great impact in the world. If you're just using your business as a way to prop up your ego, not only are you going to miss a lot of opportunities, but the legacy that you could have left, if not for the world and for your family, will be severely compromised just because you let that ego get in the way. Does that make sense?
Girl, I've had to put myself on mute for the last 10 minutes of your conversation because
I know I ramble.
Screaming. You ramble. Are you kidding? You are taking so much knowledge. Your flow is so powerful. Yes, I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm cheering. My spirit is cheering 1,000 amens. I am so absolutely honored that you shared your story with me and with our audience, and I am so thrilled for each and every ear and heart and spirit, because you're also really spirit driven. I have both of your books. I've read both of your books, and I love them. I'm honored that I'm able to introduce you to so many young entrepreneurs on fire to make a difference, and especially in this political climate. I love how you started out talking about how your family had to leave because of the political climate, but it didn't stop you. And I hope that the youngsters out there listening to this remember, don't let anything stop you. Every piece of resistance, every challenge, it is an opportunity. So, Monikah, we had an amazing, amazing interview, and now we're just going to wrap up, and I just want you to tell our audience where they can find you.
Sure. Everywhere on social media, and my website is monikahogando.com, spelled MONIKAHOGANDO.com. And, you mentioned in the bio when you were introducing me, those 4 pillars of business, health, and wealth. And I would love to give everybody in the audience we have a very special CEO Mastery assessment that we give all of our private clients to find out where they are in the health and the wealth of their business. And you take that assessment yourself. We're not going to spy on you. We're not going to be looking over your shoulder judging you. But you take that yourself, and depending on your score, you'll get some really relevant and practical, executable next steps that you can take to improve wherever you happen to land on that score. Things that you can take on right away to fix your profit or optimize your talent and so forth. So you can go look for that at monikahogando.com/30 Inspiring Women.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for blessing people with the ability to strengthen their business, and we all have no excuses to be anything less than incredible.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.